I thought I'd jump on briefly just to talk about what I would do differently if I were to go back and start carnivore as a newbie. So firstly, I'd take about 6 weeks to transition into carnivore rather than switching diets overnight. It can be quite taxing on the body, especially with the biome being forced to change so rapidly. If you're coming from glucose metabolism and you're not used to consuming a lot of fats and you change your diet overnight, you cut the carbs out, now we're producing ketones and we're edging towards becoming fat adapted, you're going to struggle initially with energy and you might feel quite lethargic and like it's not working for you. And so again, if you just transition nice and slowly, cut more and more carbohydrates out as you increase the fat intake, the meat consumption, eggs, things like that, this is going to be a far more pleasant experience for you. There are also things like oxalates and fat intake and bile production. For some people, if they're not used to eating a lot of fats, their bile production won't be able to keep up with the fat consumption. And so again, another reason why we should take it slowly. This also applies to people without a gallbladder. They can absolutely do carnivore, it's no problem. They just may want to consider taking it nice and easy with the fat at first and slowly over time increasing the fat as you learn how to produce and store bile again. And with oxalates, if you've been consuming lots of oxalates and things like potatoes, leafy greens, drinking teas a lot, and then you just cut all that stuff out overnight, you might have a bit of an unpleasant time dumping oxalates. Secondly, rather than adopting the BBBE style of carnivore, which is what I did at first, and there's nothing wrong in that, I just think, at least in the beginning, the more variety, the better, because at first it can feel a little bit restricting. I think I would have enjoyed some wild salmon and mackerel in the diet, things like duck legs with butter, It helps keep you on track and you don't get bored too fast. And then it might be able to lead you to that point where your ailments start to improve enough to incentivize you to continue, And so I think variety can be important, at least in the beginning. These days for me, I'm pretty much almost exclusively eating red meat, and that works very, very well for me. And it doesn't feel restricting. But back then, if I went from a carbohydrate heavy diet with lots of variety to just a lion diet, I think that's super extreme. So I think in the beginning, lots of variety, any kind of fatty animal products, and you could even have some lean animal products and just accompany things like butter, bone marrow, egg yolks to increase the fat. And I think that would have made things a little easier. I think that it would keep things interesting for people that feel a little bit too restricted. Now, I understand that many people are on a very tight budget with carnivore and are quite concerned about how pricey it can get. But for me, I would recommend skipping the supermarkets and hitting the butchers instead. And here's why. In the beginning, I was eating quite a lot of ground beef. And I was originally going to Tesco's, where I would pay £2.49 for 500 grams of 20% fat ground beef. But when I went to the butchers, I asked for a 75% to 25% ratio ground beef. A kilo cost me £3.50. And so it's higher quality, it's higher in fat, and I'm paying less. You'll also find things like bone marrow, which are great ways of upping the fat intake in meals where the meat may be too lean. And again, dirt cheap. I mean, you can get bone marrow bones for like £1.50 and things like this. And so it's very, very cheap. It's even cheaper than butter. And it's like the best butter on the planet, I would just encourage that people be more inquisitive and communicate more with your local butcher, build a rapport, figure out what cuts are cheapest. And the butchers I go to up the road here, he gives me lamb fat for free. I can also get super cheap ground beef. You can mix ground beef and lamb, which is really, really nice too. The fattier it is, the cheaper it gets. So that's what I would say, rather than going to the supermarket and getting subpar quality. I understand a lot of it can be quite cheap, but to me, I would much rather support my local butcher, get superior quality and pay less money. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Number 4, water. Now, in the beginning, I was still under the impression that I should be drinking lots and lots of water. I hadn't come across any meaningful information about how much water, what kind of water, is it too much, should I salt, should I not salt, do I drink during meals, after meals, all of this kind of stuff. And so what I would say is, in the beginning, I was drinking way too much water. I was just overdoing it, For me now, I drink no more than a litre of Evian water with a generous pinch of salt in a bottle, say. So 500 millilitres of water, a generous pinch of Celtic sea salt is the one I use. I believe that's the king of all salts. And, drink sparingly. You'll find that when you mineralise the water and you're eating a proper human diet, you don't actually need to drink water all the time. If you're eating enough fats, You'll find that when you fast, you don't feel that thirsty, and it's because we're creating our own metabolic water or matrix water. So again, my advice, don't drink sort of litres and litres. You certainly don't want to be drinking a gallon of water a day. That's way too much. And so my advice, obviously when you're thirsty, take a sip, take a couple of sips. But if you're mineralising your water with high quality salt, you will find that you're not drinking as much water, and you don't need to drink that much water. 100,000 years ago, we weren't walking around with a bottle of water, sip, sips. Oh, I forgot to drink water. It's nonsense, Tribes out there that still hunt and gather, they're not consuming lots of water. They're producing a lot of their own internally, which is also deuterium depleted, so it's far healthier. You may have heard certain people say, don't drink around meals. It's going to affect your stomach acid. I've also given that same advice to certain people describing certain issues, and I thought, well, maybe that will play, There may be some truth to this. It might alkalise your stomach acid. It's also why it's important to salt your water, salt your food. But I would just say perhaps avoid drinking close to meals either side. Let your body do its thing, and then perhaps 45 minutes, an hour later, you think, I am thirsty. Go and grab a small glass of water, a little pinch of Celtic sea salt or Redmond sea salt. Himalayan's pretty good too, and that should do you just fine. You'll find when you sort of add it up at the end of the day, you think, oh right, yeah, I'm only drinking around about a litre rather than 3 litres, which some people are drinking, even more. I think when I get up in the morning, I'm not really that thirsty, and so it's funny. A lot of us think, oh, we need to hydrate. You don't need to hydrate. You're in ketosis. You're producing metabolic water. If you don't drink or eat anything, you'll find you're not actually that hungry or that thirsty until you've been a bit active. Maybe later on in the day, you're getting these signals. Eat your meal, and then maybe an hour after that meal, have some water. And finally, number 5, I would simply say to look beyond just diet. And when I say just diet is huge, no doubt. I actually put it at the very top of the hierarchy. But I don't believe any human being can be optimally healthy without adequate sun exposure, natural light exposure, certainly sunrise, midday, and as the sun is setting, and minimizing the artificial isolated blue light, which is very harmful. I would actually recommend getting up and experiencing the sunrise every single day. That way you're going to maximize your circadian rhythm. I wear blue blockers. As soon as the sun goes down, I put my blue blockers on. So if I'm on a screen or if there's lights on, my body's not confused about what time it is. This way we can maximize and maintain a proper circadian rhythm, which will also optimize your sleep. And sleep is huge as well. Grounding is also something that is very helpful to practice as much as physically possible, just to, again, increase and maximize what is natural and decrease what is unnatural and artificial. Anyway, they're the 5 things that I would change if I were to go back and do it all over again. I hope this has been helpful. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers, guys.